Great. So for those that have joined, thank you for joining us this morning. It's great to have you here. I'm sure some of you might have been on the interview that we had on Tuesday. So we're going to have the same format today. What we're going to do is we're going to do a half an hour with Jenny. So we're going to talk to Jenny about everything that Jenny's got up to in life, what she's working on at the moment, and vision for the future. We're going to do 10 minutes on talking about what we can do as a collective to turn the UK into a case study for the rest of the world. Then we'll do 10 minutes on Q&A. So if anyone's got any questions as we're going through the session, do just pop them into the Q&A function, and we'll do what we can to ask all of those questions later on. And then we'll have a 5-minute sort of wrap up at the end. So that's the format for this morning. So let's get going. So Jenny Phelps, thank you very much for taking the time this morning to come and chat with us. It is great to have you here. And also thank you for your contribution on Land Management 2.0 to date with your presentation and hosted roundtable. So Jen, today is really about understanding a bit more about what makes Jen, like what the journey that you've come on to date, so how you got into farming, how you got into conservation, why it means so much to you, where you are at the moment, what you're up to and the projects you're working on, and also your vision for the future. So yeah, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Tim, so much. And I have to really thank you for all the support you've given us. And people know I'm quite passionate about the work that we do in the team and all the partners that we work with and representing farmers that care about the environment. So it's really kind of you to give us another platform to try and get some, share some of that work and enthusiasm. So Tim's asked me to talk a little bit about me and about where this sort of enthusiasm for nature and farming comes from. So I'll run a bit through that. It's not too boring for you, but I was brought up in the Cotswolds on a small farm. My grandfather on my mother's side has farmed in Gloucestershire since the 15th century. My father's family came from Yorkshire and were coal miners, but quite an academic family. And my parents went to Oxford and my brother went to Cambridge. And we were brought up on this sort of small sort of farm where effectively that we were just sort of like had some Hereford cattle and we had some landscaping and some forestry. But my father had done botany and forestry at Oxford and my mother had done zoology at Oxford. And we were brought up to sort of value nature and, we were brought up on Darwin and the origin of species and I remember having lots of animals that my mother used to say, well, the genetic recessive here is why you've got a brown bunny instead of a black one. And it was this passion for the countryside that really came to our parents. And also, I think it was about the whole sort of ethos of our family was always about how could we contribute, how could we do something to make the place better. And my mother actually went on to be a medical social worker and did a huge amount of setting up charities to help people as well. And there was sort of combination of an aspiration to both benefit society and the environment that was sort of born in us from a very young age. So I trained at the Royal Agricultural University because I had a passion more for being outside than being in a classroom. And then obviously I went and did a postgraduate management diploma in agricultural management at Steele-Hayne College in Devon. And that was in the early 80s. And that was a time when women in agriculture was quite unusual. And I couldn't get a job as an estate manager as all my RAU colleagues and friends and Steele-Hayne friends had, because it wasn't really right in those days for women to be estate managers. So I went for the Wildlife Trust in Oxfordshire as a conservation shepherdess and looked after nearly 300 Beulah sheep that's due to be roaming around nature over 82 nature reserves in 3 counties. And what really struck me then when I went to work for the Wildlife Trust all those years ago was that the farming community had sort of been deemed to be the sort of like the bad people in conservation, and that conservationists were there to sort of solve it, but they never used to talk to each other. And this seemed such a strange concept to me because of the fact that my farming family and community had been passionate about conservation and the environment, and actually it seemed a real divide between farming and conservation. So it was fascinating to me also that my job was to drive around 82 different sites with sheep in the back of a trailer when you get to a site in Buckinghamshire or Oxfordshire or Berkshire, and there'd be sheep in the field next door, and I'll be going like, well, why didn't you just ask the farmer to put his sheep in for you? Oh, no, we don't talk to farmers. So that was sort of born, really, the sort of passion that I have to try and reconnect farming and conservation, because I think they can much be, they depend on each other, as I think would be the summary of what we've found. I teach now applied farm and ecology at the Royal Agricultural University, and I think it was that passion then that actually we as farmers should be part of the team representing farmers that do care about their wildlife, who need policy and drivers to help support them to be able to farm in a way that protects nature and builds sustainable ecological systems that help produce healthy food. So from there on, after I worked for a wildlife trust for nearly 9 years, and by the time I left, that all of the nature reserves were being managed by the local farming community. And it was a real transformation, really, that there was this opportunity for the farming community to be valued, and quite often they'd been waiting to be asked by the trust and would welcome open arms being involved with places that were special to them. And then sort of moved on through the next few years, where, I actually did some work when I had my children as a planning and conservation consultant and environmental planning conservation consultant, and also then went to work. The biggest, I suppose, transformation and foundation was working for the Cotswolds AOMB, that and natural beauty, and being one of the first heritage project landscape scale project officers for the Caring for Cotswolds project. What was really interesting was that at that time, climate emergency was still a thing. It was urgent then, and also the fact that there was a lot to solve with biodiversity loss and all the things that we're still challenged with today. And Heritage Lottery had said, if we put these pilots out there for landscape scale restoration, is there an opportunity that we can learn something from this that might roll out? So it's a huge privilege to be invited to be a project officer for one of those pilots. And what we learned very quickly was that there is a huge disconnect between all the different organisations that had an interest in a local area, whether it was from water or from, historic environment or from biodiversity or from, I had a focus on common land particularly, which had lots of different designations. And what was happening was all these different organisations had a sort of single issue thing they wanted to solve, but they weren't asking the people who lived somewhere to sort of be involved. They'd sort of muscle in going, oh, we need to restore that hill fort, or oh, we need to restore that wildlife habitat. And then the local community who weren't informed would quite often go, gosh, what are they doing to our special area? We've got no idea that there's communication. And quite often that ended up in conflict, where the local community, particularly farm community, would go, well, what are they doing and why are they doing it? And why aren't they talking to the other people that came last week to want to do something else? So that was when we sort of I developed a sort of framework around trying to value local knowledge and enable people to act, and then bring together all the organisations that were relevant to the local area to support people who lived somewhere locally to take action. And it's really interesting because I always have a memory of the first case study that we did at Ulibarri Hill Fort in the South Gloucestershire, well, it's actually in Gloucestershire, the south of Gloucestershire. And it's this most stunning hill fort, and it's a place that everybody goes to stand on the top of the hilltop, take fresh air and just breathe. And it has multiple designations. It's in a protected landscape, it's a SSSI, it's got protected species, it's got the Cotswold Trail, it's historic environment, it's got geological SSSI issues, designations. And then it was just extraordinary because I came in as a facilitator and just said, how can we restore this? It was all getting covered in trees and everything was getting lost, and you couldn't see the views, and the archaeology was being damaged and the habitat was going. And the community, I said, well, I've got this sort of idea that the farming community, the 5 owners, might actually want to come together to help this, because this is how I was brought up, that I know that I would have wanted to protect it. So this was in 2002, and we brought together the 5 landowners who owned Ulibarri, and we went to the parish council and we said, oh, there are lots of volunteers that might want to help. And we brought together all of the people that had a statutory interest in Ulibarri, and said, how does this look for you from the geological side? How does this look for you from the archaeological side? How does this look for you from the water side. And actually what was really interesting was it was really simple. You just actually bring everyone together and you put them in a table and you sort of say, actually, this is a really fantastic project we can all work on together. And what's brilliant about the process is that everybody starts to realise that everybody's a human being and you don't need any conflict and that we're all working on with a shared goal. And then just magic happens and everything aligns and people start to be able to see how they can help. And all of the organisations say, oh, actually, I could contribute this or I could contribute that, or if I haven't got any resource, I could give my expertise. And the facilitator then creates this amazing cohesion that actually enables people to act. And so I remember driving away from Newleybury in 2004 thinking, what are we doing here? This is just amazing. You know, that actually the special place is in the hands of the people that it deserve and have the culture to look after it. And how can we really duplicate that? And what I was trying to work out was, where is someone's place? Where do you feel that you've got the motivation and care and to actually look after something that, because it's passionate, you're passionate about it and it's important to you? And I thought, oh, well, actually, you could draw a line around almost like a parish or ward boundary. Where we live is where we care about. And actually, that can happen quite quickly if we move somewhere, or it can be super deep-rooted if you've lived somewhere a very long time. And I thought, well, actually, that's really interesting, because then you could break the world down into sort of jigsaw pieces, and you could actually make an opportunity for all the people who live within that community, who could be communicated through the parish council, who actually have the diverse range of skills and expertise, to be able to then act and look after that piece of the world that they care about in a way that's strategic, with all those different organisations being able to support them and come together and co-deliver together and feel that they're part of something meaningful together, rather than this disjointed, fragmented conflict, which is what we saw. And so I thought, well, this is really interesting. We're going to embed it in the parish council, because then it's not hanging on a person. Because quite often with projects, if somebody enthusiastic comes in, a project happens, it's already brilliant. And then as soon as that person goes away, it sort of dissolves. So we thought, well, actually, if we embed it in the parish councils and the administrative structure, every country around the world has administrative areas. Every country around the world is broken down into parishes or wards or something similar. And we can then start to layer all these different strategic objectives and help that, those different layers, those GIS layers, help us find those partners really easily who are relevant to that local area. And then you just go in and create magic by putting people in who are enthusiastic to actually help deliver what's important to those, to the people that live there, and also deliver all those wider regional, national and international objectives. So what was really interesting is that once we'd done this at Newleybury, we were just like, oh, we can do this everywhere. And so we then did the next 25 commons as part of the Heritage Lottery project. So we then started to get all of our commons into stewardship and getting them locally led by the commoners, and to get all the organisations aligning. And then we thought, oh, we could do this at the farm level, and we could actually build the farm up, you know, and actually then start to be able to understand how every field parcel could be delivered in a context of a sort of a global context. And then my aspiration was really, I sort of thought, well, oh, this is really interesting. We could actually, when we went on from 2007 to work for FWAG, I was like, I've got this idea that you could do this for the whole parish, for every parish. And actually that it's really easy to do, because you could then actually inspire people to globally to look after their own piece of the jigsaw with this sort of like underpinning strategic opportunity to actually deliver this sort of like pennies and pounds. If we all get on looking after the bit of the world that we care about, then the world could look after itself. And obviously there's multiple different strategies that need to be aligned to do that. This process enables you to do that. And actually you can take it down to a window box level or a garden level, and actually piece the world together in tiny pieces. But the reason why we focus very much on administrative areas is that's how we as human beings have structured ourselves and associated ourselves. And that gives us a legacy to link with the impacts that we have on the world, things like planning and the economic development. So from about 2011 when I joined FWAG, 2008 when I joined FWAG, that my vision was, you know, could we get create a model based on what we'd learned from the Heritage Lottery project, which we called integrated local delivery, which was then researched and evaluated and found to be the most cost-effective environmental delivery framework that DEFRA could find in the world, which is a bit fantastic, and some other research papers on it. And we thought, well, this is a real opportunity for farmers to be reconnected with their community, to actually start to sort of create a template where every community could start to build a relationship with its farmers and could deliver this wider partnership approach that was locally relevant to them. But it needs a facilitator. It needs somebody who is a trusted independent third party who can go in and, you know, reconnect all those relationships or actually solve some of these embedded sort of issues that people have created amongst themselves, sometimes from, you know, farmers hating the Environment Agency is a classic example, or, you know, conservationists hating farmers, or, you know, whatever. And actually that at local level can actually be quite embedded. And what I absolutely have a passion for is to go into a community where people go, oh, you'll never be able to talk to our farmers, they won't do this. And the farmers go, oh, you'll never be able to get, you know, all this happening. And actually you can, and you can by valuing everyone, by respecting everyone, by listening to everyone, and drawing a line behind the past and saying, well, this is now, let's go forward together, let's all build this. And, you know, just extraordinary things happen, and I never tire of it. You know, you can rebuild not only the sort of like the socio-economic connectivity, you can, you know, start growing local food, and you can start, you know, stopping people flooding and all of that. It's the human aspect that I never tire of. It's the fact that somebody who'd hated their neighbour, you know, for 20 years actually now goes down the pub with them, you know, and actually that's the bit I just love, is the fact that it makes people happy and healthy and well. So in 2013, it took a hugely long time because funding facilitators, for some reason, just seems to be something that people they can't grasp within. It was that they can't grasp it. It's just like normally when we give funding, whether it's from any source, you know, we want defined outputs. We want those clear, you know, we built this dam, we, you know, planted these trees, we did whatever. And actually just funding, the sort of like the anthropology of solution, sort of putting a well-trained facilitator in there and just going, oh, well, good things are going to happen. So we've done all the cost-benefit analysis. So there's now over, you know, between 1 and 6 and 1 to 8, 1 to 12 even, cost-benefit ratios of putting a facilitator into a community and delivering, you know, multiple goals that are now embedded in the 25-year environment plan. So sort of, you know, to say reducing flooding, improving water quality, helping to manage soils, recover biodiversity, building resilience, you know, co-delivery and partnership working and all of that. And actually that is really just such an amazing thing to do. So it's been a challenge to do that. But what I've been to funding the facilitator, but what I've done for the last 10 years is that every time the government has said, oh, we want to solve natural flood management, we can go, oh, we can do that using integrated local delivery, but we'll deliver everything at the same time. Or we go, oh, we want to solve water quality, so we can do that, but we can do everything else at the same time. And so we just tried to do endless case studies and DEFRA pilots. So we've done, so we led on the catchment-based approach in 2013 for the Upper Thames Catchment Partnership that now has 210 stakeholders who have adopted the approach. We've then did the Payments Ecosystem Services pilot in 2013 as well, that was basically showing about who will pay for land use change, and all of these are farmer-led projects that show that we won't solve the world unless we enable the farmers to be part of the team. And then we've gone on to do many others. So then we had the Wild project, which is water with integrated local delivery, when we finally got funding for the facilitators to do 30 communities working with farmers in the Cotswold Water Park, which is now an international case study showing that this really does work. And then that sort of rolled on a bit through from 2016, but unfortunately the Environment Agency now has to fund mostly capital. And again, it's this idea that funding people is not what people want to fund. They want land use change, but what they don't realise is that there's a super fantastic opportunity for co-investment from lots of different sources if somebody can join it up. And that it's that joining up that is what enables that conduit for that blended finance and that co-delivery. And also that sense of shared purpose. I mean, the thing that I found really noticeable over the years is that people who work for, particularly the Environment Agency, Natural England, water companies, consultants, have always come back to me and said, you know, this is an amazing process because actually I feel really valued for what I'm doing, for my part. And I want to stay in this job because I can see that it's actually delivering really good stuff and it's got a benefit. I'm not just sort of, you know, trying to deliver my job in isolation. And that's been really fantastic. And then from the Wild Project, we've then done a natural flood management vessel pilot. And each time over the last 15 years, when we've got to a stage where integrated delivery has been accepted by government and we've been offered huge amounts of money to roll it out, there's been a political shock. So in 2012, obviously, we had the comprehensive spending review where I was offered 1.49 million to roll out integrated delivery, which is a bit of a blow, if I was honest. And then it took me nearly 5 years to get back to the point where the government really understood it again, and then we had Brexit. And then so I felt, well, one last ditch attempt. I'm an old lady now, you know, we've got to keep going at this because this is so important to help us act on climate change, that we decided that we would, you know, have to do ELMS as an ELMS trial, and that we could actually really embed all of our learning over 10, 15 years. And as I say, this is a partnership approach. We've been supported and researched by Natural England and the Countryside Community Research Institute. And actually the government has the intellectual property as having funded this process. So it's the government could call this its own process if it chose to. And I think what's really interesting is that for the last 4 years that I've sort of dedicated myself to the design of environmental land management scheme and to the opportunity that there is for this alignment, not only at a field, farm, parish level, but managing water to build resilience. We've got a template of groups of parishes working together along water bodies to manage soil. We have to manage water, you know, the alignment of opportunity to go to do that. And from our catchment-based approach work now, that integrated local delivery is now a language within the catchment-based approach. Catchment partnerships are now a really good strategic vehicle for helping communities and farmers find who the local partners are. It's a really well-established way of working, and then feeding that into local nature partnerships at a county level and collecting all that environmental data, and then balancing that against the local enterprise partnerships and their visions for delivering economic growth, but in a sustainable way. So I suppose now our sort of passion is that this opportunity is realised within ELM, and that's really where working with you, Tim, has been such an amazing opportunity and OS, because we've learned, particularly from our ELM trial, so much of how the mapping and the understanding of the state of the environment not only is essential for us to act on climate emergencies, that is actually also essential for us to build a platform for co-investment for blended finance. And that we were really lucky as a team because I have an outstanding team and extraordinary partners, so please don't hang all of this on me in any way. But it just happened that I discovered something called UK habitat mapping about 2 years ago, and you're probably all bored to death of me talking about UK habitat mapping. But it's just that it's an extraordinary way of us verifying the land, and not only does it enable us to verify the land use, but also the way the land is managed. So when we got our ELMS trial and our team was sort of wandering around farms going, how can we map natural capital? Because it's not quite like doing a farm environment plan as we did, because we need to think about air and we need to think about, you know, all these other things. So we were like, oh, what about that UK habitat mapping training course we went on? Would that work? And we just got immersed in the opportunity of UK Hab, didn't we, Tim? But we bullied Tim to get UK Hab into the Land App. It was like, you need to put UK Hab in the Land App. And we've been really privileged to work with Bill Butcher and to look at Eco Accountability, who actually developed UK Hab. And our colleague Dan Gira has been doing a lot of work to try and actually work really closely, try and make more codes that make it fit for the minutiae of detail of the farmed environment, including sort of all the different dotted strips and all of that. So the enormous privilege that I have is that so many people now share this vision and offer their resource. So we have brilliant friends like Kitty Rose in Ordnance Survey for mapping, who's just been an extraordinary support. All of our friends, Jonathan Storkey at CH and Rothamsted, who are giving enormous amounts of time for all of their scientists to verify the land use codes and the management codes in UK have to start attributing ecosystem function, as we learned from our ecosystem services pilot. That, you know, the land, we know the land delivers those functions. We know the land has an economic benefit if we manage it in a certain way. You know, where's the evidence? And I think that's what people are therefore struggling a little bit at the moment is, you know, where's this verification? So we're trying to get that verification for DEFRA. And it's really extraordinary because what this process of integration and delivery, co-delivery and valuing everybody does is it values that we all play a part. And I think if you're part of a team where you're all respected, the team just keeps growing because everyone goes, I want to be in that team because it's, you know, I want to play my part. And that's what's just so phenomenal, isn't it, Tim? Is that we just have more and more people are just going, yeah, I'm up for this. So I suppose sort of from that point now that we see that UK habitat mapping is essential. It's already used for biodiversity net gain as the foundation for the DEFRA biodiversity metric. And we see how that what we need is a platform to be able to enable farmers to verify the state of land use. And we've certainly had an interesting learning curve that we didn't realise that all the way that the land was mapped at sort of county-based sort of nature recovery network type level was unverified. It was sort of all this scraped data from lots of different ways that we've assessed the land before, and that having a common methodology and a platform that we could actually say, you know, we're all going to use the same methodology gives us just such an enormous opportunity for investment, co-investment, blended finance. And it also gives the farmers a chance to play their part. And as Tim will know, and I don't know if those on the call have seen our trials, but what we've been trying to suggest is that the key role that could be supported under the Sustainable Farm Incentive Scheme, that farmers could actually have a UK habitat map that they verify for land use and management codes, and that we could then actually have that information, that real-time information that's fed into the local nature recovery strategies. And that through partnership approaches, through building on the catchment partnerships and the local nature partnerships and the national park and AOMB partnerships, that we can actually align all of the investment, and that can help deliver strategically parish to district who are declaring climate emergencies, you know, up to those county-based duties that will come under the Environment Act to recover nature and deliver all the sustainable growth that we want. And that be a sort of like a template that's replicatable for every county should they wish to do so. It would be fantastic also to create an opportunity like they have in Oxford for an environmental trust that sort of helps to blend and suitably invest that finance rather than it being a bit of a bun fight. But what's essential is that we start to unlock the opportunities for carbon and carbon trading. So I suppose from our perspective now is that we think that there's just a huge opportunity to get this right, and that we're hugely grateful to DEFRA for allowing us to explore, you know, this opportunity of what particularly UK habitat mapping and tools like Tim's create for us to feed in and create this platform for not only communities to act on climate emergencies, but also, you know, our policymakers and our government to enable to have a sort of structured system that actually means that we can all play our part professionally and personally to take action. And I think from our work, particularly on the Arms Advisory Board and in the thematic working groups, what we're trying to do is enable the government to understand that there's an opportunity here not just to build an agri-environment scheme that displaces some of those blended finance opportunities, but actually, you know, that it becomes the platform and it becomes the facilitator, and that it's okay for now not to have all the verification quite yet, because some of this huge investment wanting to come into the greening, and I know through the Investment Readiness Fund, the government are keen to explore this. is that there's an opportunity for that huge amount of money that could come from carbon trading to help us economically at this, really difficult time post-COVID, and help with building back better and greener in a way that's structured. And I think that it's a really important point, and something that Tim wants me to touch on. Tim is where are we now, and how can we demonstrate to the world what this opportunity is? Because I see that there's a sort of balance at the moment, and we can either go one way or we can go the other. And actually, if we grasp it, and if DEFRA are really visionary, the stuff that they've enabled through the tests and trials, could actually be the foundation for this fantastic recovery that would help us act now on climate change, not through the transition, and actually not just be something that is sort of in the future. We don't have the time. That's the thing, really. So I think from our perspective that what we don't want is to just see a sort of like another agri-environment scheme that would be part of the mix of funding that you could have. Because as Tim and I know, don't we, Tim, that the private sector are already taking the learning from our trials and the habitat mapping and the brilliant work of the land app. I think you've got over 1 million hectares mapped now, haven't you, Tim? People creating natural capital assessments for farms, and that's good enough for carbon traders. So we don't want DEFRA to miss that opportunity, that what from them gets sort of grasped and they don't end up at their own party. And I think that's a crucial thing. We need to work super hard around the legality to make sure that we can blend this finance so that it can be this opportunity for co-investment, and that the ELM scheme doesn't try and do it all itself, that it actually doesn't end up blocking this opportunity for investment. And that what we're really, really excited about is that that we could potentially showcase this methodology where each community around the world, or each community within each county, could take action in this way, that might be able to share with other countries, as we have with research papers and the Wild Project before. Some of the work that we're doing at the moment is based around how do you recycle money within the limited money within the economy. So working very closely with lovely Adele Jones at the Sustainable Future around sustainability matrix for farmers and land managers. And we want to embed that across standards for trade, standards for procuring food locally, so that local authorities could be afforded to buy food that comes from landscapes that deliver all those environmental goods, but actually produce sustainable, nutrient-dense food that's affordable for everyone, because we've supported the funding for that. Multiple different layers of environmental delivery within regenerative farming systems, protecting the soil as the foundation for ecological recovery. And that dynamic procurement would then enable us to create a business driver for farmers to move into regenerative agriculture, and to sort of verify the attribution of the land, so that we can enable this co-investment, not only from people like water companies, local authorities, and but also people and linking into the biodiversity net gain opportunity, which I do actually think should be hosted by non-for-profit organisations. I don't think it's a good idea to have a potentially 40-50% leakage of our planning mitigations to private enterprise. I think that the government can do this well. I think Natural England is demonstrating that, particularly in the work we're doing at the moment, that planning mitigations can be mitigated through Natural England. And that we create this opportunity for to say, this sort of like this locally led opportunity for relocalization. And a lot of our farmers, having mapped their land with their communities, we're now feeding this all into neighbourhood planning. And that there's an opportunity for neighbourhood planning to be done on the land app, isn't there, Tim? And this just creates a fantastic opportunity, building on the work we did at the Wild Project, to enable communities to start to work with those partners to sort all the issues and opportunities, particularly in relation to sort of like flooding and foul sewage and stuff like that. We can fix all that at a local level, because we can know what's going on, and we can create localized projects which we can demonstrate. But then the relocalization of food, and a lot of our farmers are now starting to look at how they can explore not only regenerative agriculture, but community supported agriculture, and offering 2 acres of land, as inspired by people like John Bromley and Ian Wilkinson, who's done so much work in the field of, what to grow and how to stack enterprises and all of the role of nature in recovering the environment. So that's a sort of a bit of a run through of where we are, and we just plan to keep going until we sort of keel over, I think. If you sort of wanted a more sort of personal note, I know it sounds a bit sort of like wussy, but I remember I was lucky enough years ago to be on a boat in a marine sanctuary off Majorca, and we were sort of like surrounded by this pod of wild dolphins. It makes me emotional, sorry. And I dedicated myself. That's what keeps me going. And every time I sort of get a dip, I think I can't keep going. I remember this huge male dolphin. He came right over the back of the boat, and he looked me in the eye, absolutely dead in the eye. And it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And it was so close and so stunning. And you're sort of thinking, oh my God, what do they think of us? What do they think of us? All we do is, pollute this planet. And I suppose that's for quite a long time I used to wear a dolphin on my neck, and now I wear a swallow. But that's what motivates me. Every time I lose my heart on this, because it's been a struggle, that I sort of like go back to that point and go, keep it. So that's what it is. So so part of an amazing team that I feel passionate about. I'm very grateful to my family for allowing me to be so obsessed about the environment. Any questions, Tim, after all of that?
Yeah, Jenny. Well, I think the first thing to say, I mean, that is just the most monumental, epic amount of work to bring people together, to elicit the value that's inherent in us as people, right? We all want to live a better, more beautiful life and work with one another and enjoy the communities we're a part of. And so, I mean, as you say, it's often the role of a facilitator that enables all of that the greatness of communities to be elicited. And I think, yeah, it's very rare to hear one person be so dedicated to a mission to, help and enable people to do something they, know that is the right thing to do. So firstly, just a huge thank you for everything you bring, Jenny, and, what actually that makes available to the world, because I do think, we've obviously been on the journey for quite some time now, and it is the most extraordinary team that is a part of this mission. And I think for me, it feels like it's actually going to be very hard for anything to stop what we're doing as a collective now, because I think there's so much, we all know it's the right thing to do. We all know that nature needs us. And I think the time has come. And so I guess with that, I mean, maybe I was going to say actually for me as well, Jen, in terms of the nature experience, I did the Wilderness Trail in South Africa a few years ago, about 8 years ago, walking in the wilderness for 4 days. And you get a very good sense of our responsibilities when you're surrounded by nature like that. So, so I was going to say, with everything that you've done and created and I guess learned, like what is now needed? You've probably said it in a way, but what's now needed to turn the UK into a case study for the rest of the world? Like what if we could tee up a framework, or what do we need to put in place so that we do have what we need for the UK to be a case study for the rest of the world, that we can then export to other countries?
Well, I think some of what I've said already, but I do agree with you that, there is a huge opportunity here for us to do that. I mean, as I say, I'm very passionate about the fact that the structure that we've created is completely transferable. Any community can use this process. So I teach my students in my field module, my farming and integrated environmental local delivery module, that you can go anywhere in the world and you can find who are all the people that are interested in that part of the world, and you can actually there's a process that can be followed through this integrated delivery process. But the key thing is I think it's about the government has got, there's an opportunity for the mapping. We know the mapping is still evolving in the fact that we've still got to get more attribution of function, and we know that we've got to sort of add in a few more management codes. But that is transferable. UK Hab is a process, a brilliant way these ecologists work. That mapping system can be shared across the world, even if it has to be further adapted for other habitat types across the world. And I'm sure that Joe and Bill would be communicating with people who are doing that elsewhere as well. So I think that mapping system is really important. I think that actually that the government needs to be brave and invest in advice in the way that it's got to be the right type of people. And for those who've been on my course, I tell people you don't need to be a leader. You just need to be an assister and a facilitator that can go out there and actually value everyone. And actually, obviously, you have to know and be trained as to how to find all the partners, but it's not that difficult these days. And with all the GIS mapping and all the local partnerships that are already established. But actually, it's about sending the right type of person out there. And I think that the government could demonstrate to the world that actually we really do need to act now. And by putting those advisors out there, that would actually enable and facilitate blended finance and enabling this economic recovery and building back better, because the whole world has suffered from coronavirus, and to actually enable those people to be a reality. That, because my personal experience is that when I go to new villages, that they go, oh, hello, my name's Jenny, and are you interested in doing a community project about community resilience and climate change? And people snatch your hand off. It's like, how do we do it? Where do we start? What do we do? Who are the players? It's so complicated. There's so many people out there. And it's just wonderful. And I think that it's not, I think with all the coronavirus stuff and everything at the moment, that everyone's got lost on the fact that we are still in a climate emergency. And actually, it's obvious that there's billions of pounds being spent on trying to solve the pandemic. But actually, at a local level, you could actually really start to have these multipliers, every community taking action and enabling this resilience to take place. And I think that they need to not get stuck on just what the government can do, because as you've shown, Tim, and the brilliant Ecosystem Knowledge Network Natural Finance Conference, that there are millions of trillions of pounds, evidently, that is sat there waiting for us to create mechanisms to enable investment in the land that need to be verified and does need to be. But that journey is, we mustn't wait to say, oh, we haven't quite got the science yet to be able to do this. We can plan and make sure that we can get that investment as part of that verification. And integrity is essential. I'm not suggesting it shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. I think particularly things like the COP26, I think it's, this methodology of integrating economic recovery and environmental recovery, it's really essential. And at the heart of that, for me, is this opportunity to crack food inequality. And I think, having the UN food conference next year as well, that actually we can see that if you can value these services, that, a piece of meat or something that's very, very expensive because it's been brilliantly produced through pasture-fed livestock should be affordable for everyone. And if you can attribute the function to that land for its carbon sequestration, for its water quality, its flood mitigation, its pollination, its ecological recovery, then maybe everybody could actually be able to afford to eat nutrient-dense food. And we need to get people to understand the role of herbivores. I won't go into that one. And how actually, we do need the herbivores in the system globally, lots of them. And so eating meat and food standards is essential for us to show that if we are going to eat meat, we want to value, the well-being of the livestock, and we want to make sure the sentience is valued and that all of this is relocalized so that it reduces trauma and all the things that we all would hate to be in a system. But actually, there's a huge opportunity for relocalization of food supplies. And even my, big conventional farmers are very excited about trying community-supported agriculture and building on the amazing work of people like the Land Workers Alliance and the community-supported agriculture. And I think what's fascinating to me is that, as I say, that one of the things we can really demonstrate is this collaboration, and that it's not a competition. We need alignment to be able to make sure that we're efficient and that we move quickly and that we move now and we move together for the benefit of everyone and that we don't leave anyone behind. And I think that's my worry at the moment, is that it seems with some of the things that's being suggested that it's okay to let the old dog and stick farmer go out of business and take a payment, and then we'll just rewild and a big landscape and it'll all be fine. And I think that I'm fearful at the moment that what's happening potentially is the risk, and I know a lot of people in this field are discussing this, so I'm not sort of pointing fingers at anyone at all, but the risk is that wealthy landowners can afford to realise these opportunities, particularly around carbon investment, because they've got to be able to get consultants or experts to be able to, to help them realise these markets. Whereas the dog and stick farmer who might not have any internet, who's probably just trying to, make a living off a few sheep on a hill, based on income foregone payments, will go out of business. And that what we need to do is to learn from the rest of the world, as well as demonstrate to the rest of the world, is to how to get our aggregation of farmers and land owners to be able to come together across landscapes and catchments efficiently, so that they can benefit and enable this huge investment around carbon and potentially water management and all the other things that lovely Tom has done through the lens, to come together to realise those opportunities. So I suppose my passion is that we don't leave anyone behind, that it's possible, particularly with your mapping tools and with the opportunity to aggregate field parcels quite easily now, to do this in a way that doesn't mean that if you aren't there, if you haven't got access to those, you get left behind. And I'm about to hopefully start with a digital discovery team within DEFRA and OS and potentially RPA, and actually look at how, and I hope to ask the water companies to join in our area, because we want to bring every owner of every field parcel into the opportunity for this co-investment. Because if we can do that, we can learn from what's happened in America and Australia and Africa, where these big carbon investment funds are going. That's easy because you've got, one landowner over a large area of land. It's easy for us to communicate and give you that investment because it's not complicated. In this country, we've got 80,000 farmers, and actually trying to invest in soil carbon is what they will want to do. In the UK is something that we must achieve, because so we can see how to do it. So I suppose sort of really that from my perspective, DEFRA, I hope, and other government partners will be able to stand at COP26 and say, look what we've done. We've facilitated the opportunity for a platform for mapping. We've got all of our government organisations and departments and arm's length bodies aligned. We're using a common mapping system that's supported by our huge resource and ordnance survey, and that's being utilised by the Rural Payments Agency. And we've been the conduit for enabling, investment to build that better, greener by enabling our new environmental land management scheme design and farm transition and crop transition program to be the catalyst for this co-investment. That we're going to enable that to happen, and that we'll work really hard with our scientists to continue to verify what we're doing. And I think that in that process, we will need the support of some brilliant people that work with already, like Professor Janet Dwyer at the Countryside Community Research Institute, with the legality from people like Ludovine Pestin and people like that from Cardiff University, lots of brilliant people who are helping to support DEFRA to achieve that this year and beyond.
Amazing. And Jen, I guess a couple of things that are kind of coming to me as you're sharing all of this is it does feel like maybe there is a role to play in actually doing a call out to volunteer facilitators and then train them up and then get them facilitating in their local region. I wonder whether that's something we could do. If there's no lack of people willing to move projects forward, but they do need a bit of training, maybe there is something we could do. We could do a call out for volunteer facilitators, work with everyone as part of a group to train everyone, support them as they're facilitating so they've got a network to get more advice and feedback from. That was one thing I thought. The other thought I had was, so that was that. And then, I guess there is a piece around, instigating more projects, like in different regions. Like, should we be case studying them, have them live, see where they are in their progress, not just document them at the end, but rather keep the conversation alive, maybe through the rural Slack, the land management Slack community that we've got. So everyone's learning together throughout the country.
So we've just been given some funding from an environmental trust called 30 Percy, who have very kindly supported us to start to, build and train the opportunity for facilitators. And I feel that, and I have had this conversation with DEFRA, is that, we can't wait. There's a huge number of young people, particularly, who want to see action now. And the facilitation skills and joining that up together, it can be taught. It's you have to be a sort of person that wants to do that sort of element of facilitation and like people. But if you don't, there's lots of other roles you can play within this wonderful complex field of, you know, climate action. And actually there are facilitators out there who will be really keen to do this. And as I say, our ambition is to train up over 1,000 advisors and do an online training course if we can't get the funding, so that at least people can start to work out how to take action. So that's been supported working with FarmEd and 3030, and we're also working with my friend Fiona Galbraith, who set up Rural Link, which is an opportunity for ex-forces personnel, which is something I've been very passionate about 5 years, to be skilled to help to be the facilitators for community resilience, because, you know, ex-forces people have huge skills in community and problem-solving, infrastructure, all sorts of engagement, wonderful skills. So we hope to bring a lot of ex-forces personnel into the space as well. So I'd say yes, we're going to carry on, and I think that's a bit what I was mentioning earlier to DEFRA. I've been talking a lot to some brilliant people within DEFRA to sort of, as I said, you know, this is happening. You know, the mapping is happening. The local authorities, you know, starting to complete their nature recovery networks within their wildlife trust, and they, you know, that the horse is bolted, and actually we're going to take action and we're going to keep going. And actually, it'd be great for them to be able to feel that, you know, it was something that came from them. But we're going to carry on anyway, because we know the environmental foundations are hugely supported by Farming the Future, fantastic people like Sam Roddick and the 18 Foundation, and lots of different environmental charities, environmental foundations that want to align to help, again, be the catalyst. So I think there's a really bright future. There's still, you know, nuts and bolts to get right within trying to help policy be that conduit. And I suppose from a point of view of sharing that with other nations, that I think that, you know, that how demonstrating how this facilitates environmental recovery, you know, and equality, and takes health and well-being with us is essential. And I think we can do that. But there's still work to do across very complex government departments and policy, and that's why it's so time consuming, because there's lots of people to talk to.
Well, Jen, I mean, like you said, it does. There's so much value to be, you know, created just from the private sector, where we can work together. We can work with the environmental foundations. We can put the systems and processes in place. We can start to get that private sector funding down to farmers. We can verify it in any way we can, even if it's just georeference photos, but something, and slowly build those mechanisms back into government. So it feels like our fate is in our own hands. There's nowhere to look but beyond us. Like, we've just got to be pushing forward as a collective. And I think that's exactly what these conversations can be about.
And it's very much, I mean, I think the thing that has always surprised me is that, you know, that it isn't a competition. We're all in it together. You know, we are. We're on the same team, right? It's one biosphere, and we're all trying to do the same thing. And one of the things about alignment and this process, and we've been doing in this area for a long time, and we have done lots of other case studies around the world, and, you know, shared this with other. Well, I haven't personally done the case studies, but I've shared the methodology with lots of people in different places like Kenya and all sorts. And we've done lots of case studies around the country, and we are currently sharing lots of case studies around the country. But, you know, it's a real opportunity for us to sort of come together and bid for funding together. And what tends to happen is that the government sort of throws out a big fund, you know, oh, let's do something for tree planting, and then everybody scrabbles around trying to get their bit, you know, and there's a lot of resource with NGOs particularly, you know, having to spend a lot of time trying to bid for funding. And none of that is ever for people to facilitate it. And I think that, you know, coordinated bids and enabling a better action with us, all not having to waste too much resource, and people on the ground being able to be supported so they don't waste their resource and they can get on with it. The better. Absolutely. Great. Well, I'm conscious of time, and we have a couple of questions come in. If anyone else has any questions, do just pop them in through the Q&A and we'll see if we can get them all. The first one is from Archie. So how scalable do you think community-supported agriculture could be, or should it remain hyper-local and small-scale? Sorry, can you say that again, Tim? It dropped out.
So how scalable do you think community-supported agriculture could be, and should it stay hyper-local and small scale? So
well, it's interesting because that's something that we've been looking at the moment is that what we've been trying to suggest to quite a lot of conventional farmers who are feeling a little bit vulnerable, partly because of awful harvests and bad weather and, you know, black grass and commodity disruptions and trade and all of the rest. You know, have they got a couple of acres that they could sort of work with their community? Now, it's interesting because community support agriculture is a thing, as you know, that actually, you know, is different and developed to be specific for each community. And that's a real privilege that we're working with the CSA team and Susie. Because what they've offered is what they call incubators, which is where they go into a community and a farming sort of opportunity and work out where the market is first. Those are at different scales. So some of the community support agriculture have decided that they've got local schools that they can grow for. Some people are just growing for their communities. I mean, I think we should get to the stage where there is a couple of acres for growing in every community. Now, whether that's something that is sort of done as a commercial venture or whether that's something that's done as a sort of collaboration with the community, I think is very much up as a community, actually. And I think that's part of why I think that community supported agriculture as part of neighbourhood planning is something really interesting to discuss. And obviously, one thing I haven't mentioned on this call at all is supermarkets. And I know a lot of the supermarkets are now looking at sustainability standards as well. And I think some people think it's unrealistic to think that, you know, in conurbations that there's going to be sort of enough opportunity for relocalization within sort of cities. But I think that's where potentially that the supermarkets can play their part to enable that as well. And if we can get regenerative agriculture and the value of the environmental value of the land coming through being supported by supermarkets, then, you know, we'll have a diversity of opportunity for farmers to both relocalize but also to produce commodities more sustainably. So in answer to your question, I think it is scalable, but I don't think we need to necessarily think that we need to do the same thing everywhere. I think this is it's about society, it's about culture, it's about topography, landscape, you know, supply chain. But what I do think is a huge opportunity is for local authorities to buy food from their own counties, and that's what we're working on is our Compass project, and trying to work very closely with how that's going to be working with buying and supplying food for school meals and hospitals and universities.
Brilliant, thank you, Jen. And Jane actually asked, but the question has now been answered. How did you think that localization could work for populations in large conurbations? So well done, you answered that already. Ian's also asked a question, in terms of effective working with communities, can working with those who have a neighbourhood plan be used? And also, with regards to Brexit and changes in farming, while things like flood risk and planting more trees could be taken into account over the next few years, what other things will also be included in order to create more sustainable rural communities? So, yeah, local plans for neighbourhood plans, Brexit, and I guess, yeah, how do we include other things to create more sustainable rural communities?
Yeah, so it's brilliant. I mean, I'm lucky enough to work with Action for Communities in Rural England. That's ACO, which is a non-government organisation that supports communities in neighbourhood planning. And there was another organisation called Locality. I don't know if you've come across Locality. And the Department of Communities and Local Government, as it was then, a few years ago, put out £2 billion for every parish to have £9,000 each to develop a neighbourhood plan supported by those organisations. And what at the time I was sort of saying, but they need to connect with their environment to become resilient. This isn't just about, you know, how to protect your village hall and things like that, which is also very important, and your pub and things like that. So I think that the opportunity, what we see, and please do look at our ELMS trial, because this is what we were trialling is you know, how do you build community resilience in 5 communities by working with farmers, is that those communities can, once they've started to understand what's important in the environment around their community, what's impacting on their community, and what those opportunities are, by working with their farmers, and building that relationship back better as well. But actually, I think that it's what's interesting from our case studies is that once the community's cracked one thing, it then goes on to something else. It's like, oh, we've got a really good result out of restoring our common. Now we want to go on and we want to, do a green infrastructure project, or we want to do a sustainable energy project. So I think that it's more about sustainability and linking into neighbourhood planning and where the process that I sort of champion helps is because once you've aligned yourself with what is going on physically affecting your parish and your water body and the farmers around you in the way of soil, topography, landscape, water, soil, that. What are the infrastructure issues? And that's the thing I touched on a bit earlier is that, we as humans have been sort of like disrupting our landscape for centuries, and a lot of that infrastructure is abandoned, and that's why we're flooded with water's running down roads into the centre of communities, getting into our foul systems, discharging dirty water into our rivers. And actually, and then we become vulnerable if we have an obesity in the east, or we have floods, we become isolated, and that affects our economy, and it affects our land, and it affects all these things. So actually building this understanding of how groups of communities can work along water bodies with their farmers starts to create those opportunities. But the bit that's really wonderful for me about the framework that I sort of champion is that it's very much about the people that live there, it's the culture of the people that live there, and that integration of what's important to them and how they can actually be adaptive and use their skills. And we really truly believe that in every community you have all that you need. If you go through the electoral rolls, parish council ask for help in a community, you can access every person that lives in that piece of the jigsaw. And there will be ecologists, engineers, there will be, about every type of skill, researchers, name it, they'll all be in the community. And actually what's wonderful is you then release this social capital resource. So I think that the vision around neighbourhood planning is that the tools, particularly this is where, we're very excited about the Land app, is that, you can then start to aggregate non-sensitive data that the community can then share. And the farmers can actually offer to put forward. So in one case study, we've got our farmer is sharing with the community Land app map that all of the field margins that they've got, they haven't put in where their protected species are because they don't want people to go and disturb them, but they have put in, this is where I've got a wildflower margin, this is where I want you to come for enjoy the parkland, this is open access, this is where you can down the river. So I think that but that's what's really interesting is the farmer has gone on, or the land manager's gone from going, actually, I'm just going to have this relationship and tell the community what I'm doing, to saying, what can I do more for the community? And that's where he's moving on to exploring community supported agriculture. And that's great. And then they're talking about, solar panels on the village hall, and they're talking about all these things. And, then it becomes what that community wants to do that's relevant to that locality.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like it's just about bringing everything together, and once it's together it'll click into place and it just works. And if you've got a great facilitator that can keep the energy and the conversation alive, then everything's possible, because we can't solve any of the global problems unless we're doing it at the grassroots level. So
but Tim, I think Jenny, just to say really quickly that I know we're nearly at the end of it now, is just the fact that I think that the government thinks investing in these facilitators is really expensive, and initially it would be expensive. You put 1,000 out there, which is what I want to be about 50 million quid. But actually, there's two things. Is that one is it's not forever. People are intelligent. People learn this system really quickly. The facilitator is the relationship builder, is the person who's the sort of almost like the healer in a sense of all these relationships that have become. And quite often people go, oh, well, I can't see how this would work in my community because nobody gets on. Well, that's the core of it. It's just like, that's why nothing's happening, because nobody knows each other or trusts each other or understands what all the organisations do. So that's essentially important, is for government to realise this is not forever. And once you've rebuilt those relationships, the community doesn't really need you as a facilitator anymore. Yeah. You're just there as a sort of like as a leveller. And for example, my latest case study at Bledington, the actual flood group put money in their own pockets to fund Swag's time for me to do some work there for about a week. And it's about £2,000 that they paid Swag's time to go over the last 6 months. And we facilitated 30,000 quid straight away from a WEEF grant for doing natural flood management enhancements. We've also had offers of natural flood management funding from the local authority and from the water company And it's quite likely. And then we've got potentially 3 or 4 country-side stewardship agreements that we'll be doing next year, and then planning some more natural flood management. So for their £2,000 investment in my time, I think probably if you come back to me in 2 years, we'll have facilitated probably £500,000 worth of funding, if not more. That's the blended finance. That's where the facilitator goes. We went straight to catchment partnership. Who's interested in helping with this? Who are all the players? This is what the farming community is kind enough to support doing to stop this village flooding. And then that community now wants to go and explore a growing area and growing and working with its farmers. So it's not forever. It's a response to climate emergency. It's releasing that social capital to let people act, to stop feeling anxious, to stop having that eco-anxiety, blundering around with thousands of different stakeholders, never knowing quite who does what and how to join them together. Yeah. And that's what we teach on our module, is we teach the facilitators, teach these young people who want to act and be part of climate action, how to simply join all those partners together, go in and support people, rebuild those relationships, and then let them get on with it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's much more expensive not to fund facilitators. It sounds like a lot more money is going to go down the drain if there are not facilitators to coordinate the money that is moving.
That is exactly it, Tim. Sorry for interrupting, but that is exactly it. And this is the thing that has been absolutely driving me insane, is that the cost benefit, the wastefulness in some of the communities. When we do the scope, we find between 40 to 50, maybe 60 different stakeholders, of which at least 50% of them are publicly funded, doing single issue stuff that they really can't do on their own. And then what happens is, because they haven't done it or haven't been able to spend the money, but no fault of their own, because they haven't got all the other governance pieces of the jigsaw, potentially, that they then, go, oh God, we underspend, and then they chuck a load of money out, and then all the NGOs run around trying to deliver stuff. And it's like, this is bonkers, because actually, we do need somebody to join, even joining up big organisations like water companies themselves, benefit from it. Joining up all, and the catchment coordinators and the EA are really good. But it's like they've got to join up. But once you do that, it's extraordinary what you can deliver.
Everything's possible. Jenny, it's been absolutely fascinating chatting to you, as always. So thank you so much for your time. I am sure that we can try and do everything, we can definitely try and bring together more facilitators and do what we can through the Land Management 2.0 network. I mean, the time has come, and I think there's nothing stopping us. So look forward to having that conversation with you. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you very much for having me. And let's look after the dolphins, hey? So,
absolutely
cheers.
Right. Absolutely. And thank you everyone that's joined this morning. And we'll be making this video available on YouTube, and we'll also be putting out as a podcast as well. So you'll be able to listen back then. So thanks everyone. Have a great day, and look forward to speaking soon.